Hey friends, how are you? Welcome back to another video. It's your girl Meg, and today's video is a kickoff of a 4-part series that we're doing that's makeup for beginners. This series is going to be geared towards people who are kind of stuck in a rut, who want to refresh their makeup routine, who feel a little hopeless and helpless when it comes to applying their products and getting the best results that they can. So this is for beginners, and it is for people who just kind of want to refresh things or want to learn some new tips and tricks. I have got you covered. This first video in this series is talking all about a flawless base routine. We're going to talk through primer, foundation, concealer, and powder, and all of the different things I do to get my makeup to look as best as it possibly can. So if you're interested in this series, make sure you hit that thumbs up button, hit the subscribe button so you can see the next ones that upload, and make sure to follow along on social media so we can be friends. And one more thing I want to add, throughout the entire series, I will also be focusing on using only one makeup brush set, and I will be pointing out the brushes that I'm going to be using. This set is from Amazon. I will be linking it down below with you if you want to follow along, just to make things easy and to also help make choosing brushes a little bit more simple as well. Hopefully that makes everything super easy and helpful for you. So if you want to check out my flawless base routine, go ahead and let's keep on watching. Alright friends, you ready to start the flawless base routine? We're going to take you through everything from primer all the way to powder. First of all, let's talk about a few things. Skin prep is extremely important, so you want to make sure that you are doing your morning skincare routine, which includes SPF and some sort of moisturizer that you've laid down to prep the skin. If you're laying makeup on top of skin that is not hydrated, that is dry, that is tight, it's just not going to lay as well on top of your skin. Second thing is, again, you want to make sure that you're using SPF, even though if your foundation products have SPF in them, it's never a bad idea to kind of double up on that. That doesn't mean you're going to get double the protection. That just means that you're establishing a good routine and always wearing sunscreen. Okay, first of all, let's prep the skin with primer. After that, I've done my morning skincare routine, but I'm going to go in with primer just as a way to like smooth out the skin. Primer can do a couple different things. You can do a moisturizing primer, which adds more moisture, more hydration to the skin if you want that. If you're a dry skin type, you can do that. You can go in with a gripping primer. Those are more geared towards really kind of helping the makeup adhere to the primer and last longer on the face. That's a route that you can go. The Milk Hydro Grip primer is a good one. There's an IT Cosmetics primer that is also a good gripping primer. I will link suggestions below if I'm not using them on camera today. Or third is you can use a smoothing or pore filling primer to kind of give this skin more of a soft focus finish that you are going to lay the foundation on top of, meaning you're going to kind of like smooth out the canvas. And that's kind of the route that I go with a lot of my primers. I do like hydrating and gripping primers, but most of the time I'm reaching for a poreless smoothing primer. So I'm using the e.l.f. Poreless Putty primer, and I'm just going to like warm it up with my fingers, dab it on the skin. You don't need a whole lot at all. The thing with makeup, especially laying down your base, is less is more, okay? It's better to go in light layers than to kind of just slab a bunch of stuff on your skin. And I'm patting that in, pressing it in, and it just leaves a nice silky canvas for everything to lay smoothly on top of. One thing I also want to mention is you want to definitely make sure that your under eye area is completely prepped as well, that you're using a hydrating cream, you're letting it sit under the eyes for a few minutes. And one trick I want to share with you today is mixing an eye cream with a little bit of eyeshadow primer. I am using one of my favorite drugstore eye creams, the Cetaphil one. I'm using a tiny dot of that, and then go in with any sort of eyeshadow primer that you have. It doesn't really matter. This is just the Too Faced Shadow Insurance, and I'm mixing in a tiny little dollop of that with the eye cream. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix these products together in between my fingers and sort of dab under the eyes. We always forget to prime our eyes, and using a primer on the under eye area makes a huge difference with concealer settling into fine lines and wrinkles and, you know, slipping and sliding around and just looking bad. So you want to use that all around the eyes. And the reason why I mix them is sometimes I find some eyeshadow primers to be a little dry. So I like to mix the two of them to give like a nice, more hydrated, prepped appearance to my under eye. I know that's a lot to talk about under eye prep, but it's super important before you start your base. Second thing I want to say is there's different schools of thought. You just do what makes sense in your routine, meaning some people do their eyes first, some people do their brows first, and some people do their base and their foundation and all that first. Me personally, I usually go this route because when I'm doing my eyeshadow or my brows, they're typically looks that I'm going to create that I know are not going to create a ton of fallout on my skin. If I'm creating an eye look that I know is going to probably have some fallout, I will go with my eyes first. If you have problems with fallout, if you have problems with shadows kind of smearing onto your makeup, you might do your eyes first. This is just what I do. There's no right or wrong way to do it. So yeah, let's just do this. And again, I am using all of these brushes from my favorite Amazon makeup brush set. And I'll show you exact which brushes I am using at what time. Let's go ahead and apply the foundation. Again, this foundation prep is more of a fuller face, more of for a glamour look. This is not something that is a really run out the door and go, although you can do this and you can perfect this to be something that you can do quickly. This is geared towards more like I'm wearing a full face of makeup. This is how I'm going to do my base. So please be aware of that. I'm using the brand new IT Cosmetics Your Skin But Better foundation. I'm using this one on camera because I feel like it works really well for all skin types and it has a good shade range. So I'm trying to use stuff that has good shade range and I feel like is good for a bunch of skin types. This is medium to buildable coverage and it's just a really beautiful, looks like skin, and the finish is amazing and all that. So there's a couple ways that you can apply foundation. What I like to do is I like to put it on this skin like this in a light layer because, again, if I'm taking 2 full pumps of foundation and smearing it all over my face, I'm creating more of the chance for this to cake and slip and slide. There's 2 different ways you can also blend it out. You can use a makeup sponge or you can use a foundation brush. This is in that makeup brush set. Using a foundation brush with the flat top like this gives a nice flawless finish and it's just fast. I like that it's fast. There's no right or wrong way to blend in your foundation. You can also use your fingers. You can use whatever you find. So, and then this is the Beauty Blender side. This gives a little bit more of a softer focus. I feel like sometimes the Beauty Blender will kind of take away coverage a bit. So you'll even find me when I'm applying foundation, I'll go in with my foundation brush just to kind of get it all spread and buffed into the skin, and then I'll take my Beauty Blender sponge and just sort of stamp in any brush strokes or any other problems that I see is on my face, which are none. Okay, so what I do at this point is I assess the coverage and say, okay, am I good here? Is this like where I want to stop? I feel like this side needs more coverage because I did blend it out with that sponge, so I'm gonna add a little bit more and blend it with my brush. But again, yes, I look at my skin and I say, okay, can I add another layer? You know, I really look at the hairline. Did it get blended out everywhere? What am I looking at right now? And how am I gonna go from here? Do I wanna stop and just go in with the concealer next? Or am I gonna add a layer? In this case, I'm just gonna go ahead and add a tiny bit more. I think a total of this, I'm using maybe 1.5 like full pumps. I'm being very light-handed with this. And what I like about this foundation is that it is a very light consistency, very thin, which I feel like the thinner the consistency with the more pigment is there's less ability for it to cake and kind of settle. I like a thinner consistency. I do like thicker consistency stuff too. You just have to be very careful with the way that you apply and blend. So brushing it on, blending it out once more. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to conceal the under eye area and then powder. So what I like to do is if I'm having some darker circles, as I like to go in with a color corrector first, and I'm going to show you the correct way to correct. I feel like there's a little bit of misinformation out there on this. For me personally, I notice that my under eye area circles are a little bit more bluish. They're more cool toned. So I go in with a peachier corrector. This is from LA Girl Cosmetics and the shade is Peach Peach Corrector. Another one is the Charlotte Tilbury one. There is also a Bobbi Brown one. Now you want to be aware of what your under eye circles are doing, right? You want to make sure that you are using the proper color to color correct. Meaning if your under eye area is a little bit more sallow, it's got a lot more brown, green, like that kind of darkness, as opposed to like a purpley blue under eye circle. If you find that your under eye area is kind of more on the brown side, you might look into a pink corrector or a salmon tone. Just kind of experiment with this, and this is why I recommend the LA Girl one to start out with, is because there is a peach one, there's a pink one, there's a dark orange one, there's all sorts of ones, so you can kind of play with it, like order 2 of them, order the pink one, order the peach one, and then see which works the best with your under eye circles, because I guarantee you once you kind of nail this down, you're going to have less problems with your under eye circles poking through. A big misconception is that people buy a concealer that's like 4 shades lighter than their under eye area and put it on thinking, oh, this is gonna get rid of my dark circles because it's so bright. And you'll notice that if you do that, sometimes the dark circles just pokes through it and looks gray, and it still looks sallow and like gross under there. My combo is to use a peach corrector under the eye with a concealer that is about my skin tone, or maybe 1 or 2 shades lighter. I find that that does the best job erasing those under eye circles and looks super fresh. So when I use my corrector, I am just taking the tiniest amount, and I like this has like a little brush tip applicator, the tiniest amount, and you'll notice, see how it's just a peachy color. And I'm focusing this on the spots that have the most darkness. I am not slabbing this all over the under eye area, because not all of my under eye area needs the same amount of correcting. So one other thing that's super important is to not completely blend this all out. I just kind of take my finger and dab in the corrector, and I'm not totally blending it out. If there's a little excess, I'll take my sponge and sort of tap at that, but I want the color correction. I really want this product to do what it's meant to do, so I'm not gonna blend it out. Well, I mean, I'm not gonna blend it out with a sponge. I'm just going to tap it in and let this pigment really do its thing. Also, one thing I do is kind of sit here for a second and wait before I go in with my concealer. So let's wait like 30 seconds to a minute. All right, I've waited a few seconds, and now I'm gonna go in with my concealer. I'm using the e.l.f. Camo Hydrating Concealer today, and I'm using it in a shade Light Sand, which is about my skin tone. It might be just a little lighter. We'll see when we get it on the skin. I don't remember yet. It's probably about the same tone as my skin tone. Okay, another technique you want to make sure that you're doing is not using too much concealer. I feel like the trend is just to over abuse concealer and doing these triangles with tons of it, and it's all over your face, and it's like, why is this product just settling into lines? And it's because you're using too much, okay? You want to use a light amount. I'm going to show you how much to use. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then a little there, a little there. That's it, okay? Again, like with the foundation, the less you use, the more you can layer, and the less amount of it for it to be creasing. Now I take my finger, much like I do with the corrector, and I begin to spread it out a little bit under the eye. Oh my gosh, look how magically that covered everything. It's because I didn't use a ton of product. It's enough, and it just spreads out. And I kind of take this towards the temple to give that all a nice covered under eye. Okay, again with this, I'm gonna let it set for a second, maybe about 30 seconds. So let's wait another 30 seconds before we start hitting this with my makeup sponge. Letting this sit for a few seconds is also going to let it warm up to your skin. Your skin is warm. It's 98.6 degrees. This concealer is not that warm. Once you're letting it kind of sit there for a second, it's warming up, and it's also like gonna set much better and spread and blend out, and you're going to have to do less work and less product. Okay, we've let this set for a second. I'm gonna go around the edges of what I'd lay down, the edges of the concealer, to blend that out first. I'm going around to the edges of that, and now I'm going to hit with my, okay, did I mention this? This is a damp beauty sponge, meaning I've put it under water on the sink, squeezed out the excess, and now I'm hitting the under eye area. I want to make sure I'm getting this all. And I'm barely tapping it. I'm using in a pouncing motion like this. If I find that I see any other darkness or dark areas poking through under my eyes, I'll then go in with dots more. I'll even just put it like the tiniest amount on my finger and tap it in. I'm not going to use this applicator because that means I'm going to end up using way too much product. I don't feel like I need any. I feel like this really covered what I needed it to cover. And then we are gonna move on to powder. Okay, couple things that you can do. I usually set my under eye area before I set the rest of my face. I kind of let this get less tacky. I want to kind of let it dry down a bit, because sometimes if your concealer is still kind of tacky and wet and then you press like a powder into it, it gets too dry, or it comes off on like your brush or your sponge or your puff or whatever you're using. If that under eye area is still wet, you might take some of that coverage away. So you want to make sure that everything's sort of dried down as much as you can before you start going in with your under eye powder. So let's make sure that that under eye area is completely dry before we move on. One other thing I like to do is while it is, while this concealer is drying down, is I make sure to look into a mirror, and if I see it settling into any lines, I'll tap into it to make sure that it doesn't. Now, just the way that my anatomy works, the way that my eyes look, sometimes products settling into fine lines is just the name of the game. It just happens, especially expressions. Like, I have huge eyes and it just happens. You can't avoid that, but keeping an eye on it and pressing that sponge in as it dries down is gonna make a big difference. Okay. I feel like this under eye area has settled down as much as it could. This is a hydrating formula. This concealer is hydrating, so it doesn't become like a powdery finish. You just want to make sure that it's not like wet and not super tacky before you go in with your powder. All right, so let's go with the powder. Today I am using this number 7 Lift and Illuminate Triple Action Finishing Powder in the shade Light. I'm using something that's just a slightly lighter than my skin tone, and this is pretty translucent, but it has a little bit of a pigment to it, so I like this one. If you like the Charlotte Tilbury airbrush powder, this is a fantastic dupe. It's very finely milled. The other one that I like is the Maybelline Fit Me loose powder. This is in the shade Fair Light if you want to go a loose powder route. I'm just going to share with you how I do this today. I'm taking a powder puff. I find that, and these are super cheap on Amazon, I will link this. I find that a powder puff really helps like press that powder into the area without it overdoing it. You get the right amount of product every time. Some people like to dip a damp sponge in and press it in. I find that this like kind of messes with the texture and the finish a little too much if I'm using a damp sponge. I find that the powder puff gives a much more flawless look. So again, I will press in and see if I have anything settling. I will take my powder puff. I kind of stick my finger right there and sandwich it like a little taco. Press into the pressed powder, or you could do this with the loose powder. And then I'm using the tiniest bit under the eye to set it all down. And this makes a huge difference because I feel like we're over abusing powder as well. We're using so much of it that it starts to cake, flake, slide off, and settle into weird spots. That under eye area is flawless. And then you could go in with a brush or, this powder puff and set the rest of your face. If you're trying to make your skin super bulletproof, like you have oily skin or you live in a hot climate, you could definitely take this powder and like powder your T-zone, your nose. These are my oily areas right here. Or you could take a fluffy brush and just set the rest of your face with that. This is the brush that I'm using from that set. And there is my skin. We got a flawless base, but it looks weird right now because I'm not laying anything else on top of that. This is an extra step you don't need to do, but I always do it because I am oily, and while I am oily, I don't want to look too flat and matte. This is a finishing powder. This is a finishing powder by Laura Mercier. There's also some drugstore options that you can use. I'll link one that you can use in place of this. But what I like to do with this is I will take a brush, and what this does is this kind of fakes the whole luminous skin finish. I didn't say this before, but you don't have to set your foundation with powder if that's not you. If you're dry, if that doesn't work for you, this is just what I do. But I find that it leaves too much of a matte finish to my face. So this is when I go in with my finishing powder, just a light dusting all over the skin. I'm going in such light layers, and while it seems like there's a lot of powder going on, I'm not using a lot of it because, again, the more you use, the more that's gonna cake. You see how that's bringing my skin back to life? This is what I love so much about this finishing powder, is that it just like gives my skin a different dimensional finish after I've laid everything on top of it. Or instead of using this with this, you could just go in and set your face with this. This is my flawless base that has a little bit of dimension to it. And I use setting spray twice in my makeup routine. I use it at this point and then I use it at the end. It is because I am oily and I live in a very hot and humid climate. I find that setting spray now and at the end is what really helps my makeup last all day. So I will go in with my Holy Grail Urban Decay All Nighter and spray my face before I move on to the rest of my makeup. We got a flawless base and we are ready to take on the rest of my makeup. Alright friends, that concludes the first video in this 4-part series, my flawless base routine. This is what the makeup look looks like once, you know, I obviously get everything else done on my face. So hopefully this gives you something to look forward to in the coming videos. Hopefully you learned some new tips. Hopefully this was helpful for you, and I thank you so much for watching. Stay tuned in the next video. I will link it down below. You'll find it. If I have it all uploaded, you'll see the series below so you can go ahead and catch up to other ones. But the next one in series is going to be our bronzer, blush, and highlighter, especially with placement and stuff like that. I think it's going to be super helpful. So stay tuned and I will see you all in my next video. Bye!